with all that being said, I do want to introduce to our stream tonight our special guest, Robbie Jaeger. He's a writer and researcher working for the MCSC network. An investigative journalist, a sociopolitical commentator, a campaign finance reformist. Sorry, I can't speak tonight, Robbie, and I butchered your introduction, but we're so glad to see you, and we're so glad to be joined by you. We thank you for your time, and we've just really been enjoying, checking out your investigative journalism. I feel like you are ahead of this beat. Everyone's kind of now talking about TYT, because of this beef, this very public beef going down between, Jimmy Dore and Cenk that we covered on Twitter, and just renewed, interest, people really looking into their financing, questioning their integrity a little bit. And again, you wrote this great piece for Medium, The Ideological Failure of the Young Turks, which is among many great pieces that you've written, which I've linked to in the description box. Check out Robbie's reporting. How's it going, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, man, thanks a lot for having me, guys. Actually, so it is kind of odd. I mean, I guess I'm glad that things have at least the conversation is now kind of finally being had, at least more publicly now, because I was kind of one of that piece of that little fringe part of the journalism world, little independent nobody, which I kind of, I still am, but still, like, at the time when I published this, it was like mid to late 2019. So obviously there have been some things that have changed as far as context of the article goes, but the main crux of it is definitely it's actually, I feel like it's been vindicated, at least to the extent of how we saw things progress from the time I published this article in like August or September of 2019, and watching the primary process and the general election process unfold and TYT's coverage of it, and then I guess now culminating with, like you said, just the very public beef between Cenk Uygur and Jimmy Dore, and how it's just kind of, I wouldn't say it's fractured the left to a certain extent, because the fact of the matter is that this is something that the argument had to be had, right? And there was always going to be a difference of opinion on how the strategy was going to go. But yeah, man, it is kind of strange. Not really strange to be talking about it now. I'm glad to be talking about it now. I'm glad to be on the show with you guys. But it's just been it's just been kind of a whirlwind, dude. Like, I was listening to you guys talk before I got on, and how you said that, and I'm with you guys back when TYT was first coming on. I was all there. It was right, like you said, early days of YouTube. The famous rants he would get on. It was it was something that nobody out there was talking about, that kind of stuff at that time. It was all the stuff that people our age, I feel like, were thinking about in our head, and we were wishing that we had an outlet, somebody to really champion these causes and give these stories coverage that just weren't getting coverage. And for the longest time, they were doing that. And it's just like, and I heard one of you mention, their infatuation with Elizabeth Warren, which was one of the many calling cards of, kind of their descent, or their slide towards the center.
Yeah, was that when the sort of, the wave began to break for you, I guess? You know what I mean? It was kind of their true colors were revealed with Elizabeth Warren. Because I can say for me personally, the first time I was like, what, fuck TYT. This is, clearly you're not walking and standing by your principles, was the whole union thing. Jen came out against the union at TYT. Right. And I'm like, how can you call yourself a leftist, a progressive, whatever he calls himself, and not support a union at your own company after
right.
justifying taking these millions and millions of dollars? Like, you know what I mean? Like, as independent media people, we all know that kind of money is not what that kind of money buys corruption.
Yeah, right. It never comes with strings unattached, right? Yeah. I don't care what anybody says. Nobody's just going to throw you $20 million and expect nothing in return for it. Like, this isn't just a favor they're doing you. They are making, it is what they say it is. They are making an investment. And I don't know about you, but I've never heard of a businessman that invests in something that they don't accept a return on that investment from. Like, I just expect one. I'm sorry, I can't speak tonight either, apparently. But no, seriously, I mean, that's the way I look at it. That's why and I do a lot of campaign finance reporting, and to me that stuff matters because the people with the most money are also spending that money specifically in politics and media for one common goal, and that is to monopolize the information flow in one form or another. Like, you want control over the message. That's, you want, especially if you're of the billionaire class, you want to formulate a message that, is going to basically, it's going to help your way of life, right? It's going to
Noam Chomsky, man, manufacture consent.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that TYT was always that way. But even going back to 2016, right? So the huge thing with the DNC primaries, the DNC fraud lawsuit, but even before that, there was the allegations of the rigging, and it was a total disaster, right? And I mean, honestly, in the emails, that's what they show. It shows a behind the scenes attempt to completely just rig that entire primary against Bernie Sanders. And even with the evidence in their faces, they still managed to tell their audience, even back then, to just kind of swallow that pill and jump behind Clinton because Trump was more dangerous. Now, the opinions of that could vary, but the point of that matter is that kind of, I'm willing to, I guess, to forgive that. But to me, it was kind of like, hey, this was the opportunity that you guys had to really make a stand and say, no, you cheated us. It's the evidence is right in our face. But yet somehow we're just going to accept this and move on like nothing ever happened. And that was my first thing. And then the Russiagate coverage really started taking off. And then, of course, like you said, the infatuation with Warren. And it just seemed to me like, and of course, Cenk is starting to go on making appearances on MSNBC or was it seen? It's one of the two. I'm sorry, but he's making a lot of appearances on mainstream outlets. It's almost like he was like a feature, like on a weekly for one of the shows. And it was just a whole bunch of, it might have been Cuomo, yeah. And but regardless, to me, it was a bunch of things one after another that were just, it didn't seem right. It just didn't seem like something that someone I would consider a progressive. It was just a whole bunch of things that anybody that I would consider a progressive wouldn't consider these things acceptable to do. And if they did, it would be even harder for them to look at their audience in the face and justify their decisions, or make excuses for what it was. And of course, then the money, right? The Katzenberg money, which is the big chunk of the story. Major Hillary Clinton donor. Donated millions of dollars to both her campaign and then her victory fund, funded number of her super PACs, right? Spending advertising money, all that kind of stuff. One of the hugest donors of that cycle. And then, he was the big name on the deal. There was a few others that were involved that we can go over in a minute. But, once you see that, it's just kind of like you start getting these tiny little building blocks of distrust. And they start building upon each other.
I also want to get your opinion on Cenk's various packs. He has like Wolf Pack and Resistance Pack. And I've always been a little bit sketched out by them. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because he seems like such a fucking capitalist in the way he's always like selling everything to his audience.
I want to corner the progressive market. I'm happy to have the entire progressive media market.
But at the same time, I feel like a lot of people are being suckered into, the mission of these, or maybe not suckered into. I'm interested to hear your opinion on if they're actually doing good work at Wolf Pack and the Resistance Pack, or if these are basically just kind of grifts, scams. Okay,
so Wolfpack, it's not very successful. I mean, it's just not in the grand scheme of things. It just doesn't pull in that much money. A lot of the money that it does spend, is it making an impact? It might be nominally making an impact, but they also, they pay their fair share of salaries and stuff like that. But they really just don't pull in that much cash. And they haven't for a while. So what good they're really doing, I don't know. I mean, with the amount of money they're raising, they can't be doing too much. I mean, and that's just from, I spend hours looking at this stuff, and compared to a lot of other, PACs that are out there raising huge sums of money and spending huge sums of money, Wolfpack is generally doing neither of those. But on the other hand, Resistance Pack, basically that was just Cenk's campaign committee. Retool.
Yeah, what's going on with that? I don't want to get into tinfoil hat territory, right? Because I don't have any evidence for this. So, shoot me down if this is, not substantiated. But the more that this kind of cookie crumbles and you start to get a wider picture of TYT, and I became familiar with your reporting, and you really get to see the extent of the swamp infesting TYT, right? In a lot of the same ways that you might say that it's kind of tainted the judgment of the squad members that have gone on to inhabit, DC and go onto the Hill, right? This kind of judgment sort of taints their vision. Do you think there was some sort of like a grand strategy behind him running for Congress that had like a business means? Was that, I don't know. It's hard to not see everything as a grift, right? Once this kind of thing happens, you're like, you start not trusting anything. You want to kind of question everything, all their decisions. I don't know.
Oh, well, I mean, look, as far as it's hard to consider it a grip, and only because I just don't know how much money he's personally gained from any of it.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was like an exposure thing. I mean, right? Like Donald Trump ran for president because he wanted to, you know, build his platform. I didn't know if, you know, oh, we'll cover your campaign stuff. Like, we want you to run. We think it'll be good for the network. You know, that seems like a venture capital idea. I don't know.
Definitely. Well, I mean, it's definitely a great advertising ploy, right? For somebody that started like arguably the quote unquote progressive channel or news outlet to run for an elected office, especially in the state of California. It's great. You know, even if you don't know you're not going to win, but even if the odds are against you, you still get your name out there. And in the end, you can always go back to your old job with a little bit more notoriety. But in the end, he kind of pulled a Pete Buttigieg, right? And what I mean by that is that Pete Buttigieg, he also took his presidential campaign and converted it into a PAC called Win the Era. And, you know, basically what that PAC does is basically split in two halves. Half of it donates money to candidates, and a separate bank account produces like super PAC type deals with commercials, online advertising, stuff like that. And that's essentially what Uygur did with Resistance PAC, but again, to a far less successful extent. There just doesn't seem to be like too much interest as far as campaigns go in getting Uygur into office or even giving him any money. He seems to, but even though he asks for money all the time, you know, it makes me wonder. That's the one thing we'll never really know as far as Cenk's finances, as far as TYT's finances, is that, you know, when they go through rounds of funding, so if they inevitably get more investors, that will be filed with the SEC. We'll have a paper trail. We'll be able to see that. We won't never really know how many actual viewers donate to them and how much money they're raising off their actual donors. And, you know, it's just Jimmy Dore actually raised a couple of good points that I hadn't heard before until he said it. And one of them, you know, he made a big deal out of like their constant fundraising emails and asking, it's like multiple times a week, apparently. And, you know, it's funny because one of his board members is a man named Sean Colo. And he was actually the primary investor, not Katzenberg, in TYT. He started up a venture capital firm called 3L Capital. He got that with some seed money, about $100 million from Goldman Sachs. You know, that's how he started his career.
Small investment of $100 million.
Right. And actually to date, 3L Capital has raised over $211 million. And they've actually started a new fund in 2020 in April. Then they're asking for $400 million in investments in. And that's the thing, is that they've invested in like a space company called Relativity Space. They basically like 3D printing rocket ships, for lack of a better word. And the point I'm making with all this is that there's money at the top of TYT.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I thought it was horseshit the other day when Anna Kasparian gets on Twitter and tweets at some like random account that was like making a joke on Cenk's expense, like, oh, you know, you need to sign your Twitter with please support TYT so I get the full experience. And Anna Kasparian like tries to clobber them with her like million followers, being like, how dare you challenge us? You're smarter than that. We need money. Blah blah blah. Like shut the fuck up and keep driving your BMW. You know what I mean? Like like I think that it radiates champagne socialism.
And I think especially in this climate now with, you know, especially with the pandemic, like, you know, every one of us, I'm sure, have like some sort of means of, you know, like a Patreon or something like that, you know, some means like that. But not all of us are out here pushing it down everybody's throat. I mean, we're all struggling. We're all independent YouTubers, journalists, you know, like I don't get paid for anything. Like I work with MCSC, but they don't pay me, you know, like I have to, you know, if I want any kind of monetization, I've got to go figure out a way to do that for myself. So, I mean, I totally get that, but none of us are on the level of TYT who have legitimate corporate backing and legitimate billionaires like backing this cause. They're sitting on their board right now that could just easily slide them another 10 million tomorrow. But they're going to keep asking money because they want to give you that. It's the same thing that to a certain extent the Intercept does. And I don't want to get too far off course, right?
Yeah, but this is true though.
It is kind of the same deal, right?
Vox even does this shit.
Yeah, they have a giant Silicon Valley billionaire footing their entire bill.
The dude that founded eBay, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Pierre Omidyar, right?
Yeah.
So, and he's, you know, he himself, you know, it's gnarly how much money that First Look Media gets from like other billionaire nonprofits. Like I said, I don't want to get too far off
They're
course,
paying
but
their
the point
entire
is,
executive staff like $500,000 or $500,000 a year. I'm
yeah, it's
thinking like,
crazy.
guys like Naomi Klein, like
Yes,
James Klein, or
six figures.
not Jim Ryburn. Sorry, James Ryburn. What that guy's name? The Russiagator from Intercept. James
Right.
Ryburn. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, guys, I did want to bring Kamali into the conversation real quick.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, Kamali, because obviously, as you mentioned, you know, we're all independent here. It's not like we're being funded or really making a lot of money off of the work we're doing. Like, Kamali, what's your opinion on that? Where do you draw the line, you know, when something starts to get corrupt? Because I mean, we don't want to be naive about things, and obviously, we understand that, you know, even the Young Turks, it's a business and it has to, you know, make money, and it has to you know, I mean, if they're going to make it, they want people to watch it. And especially in such a, you know, mainstream liberal media atmosphere, you know, they probably, you know, someone that might be a little bit maybe naive would just think, well, they're just taking this money so that they can increase their message. They can get the message out to more people. So Kamali, what's your opinion on that? And, you know, what if some Clinton backer offered you, you know, $20 million to make the radical democracy, you know, a little bit, you know, wider scene? What would you say?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have a tough time turning down 20 mil. I don't know what I'd do from that point forward. No, but really though, but honestly, I think that there's a serious question when you're talking about media. And I think that it's really important that for media in particular, that it be something that is uncorrupted. And I do think that private money, you know, like this. Now, there's a big difference between, you know, a masses of people, you know, 100,000 people contributing $1 or $5 each versus one single person contributing, you know, $100,000 or $1 million. And I think that it does have a naturally, you know, or corruptive influence. And I really think that for independent media that we have to look to funding ourselves through you know, through public channels. I think that what we really need is systems whereby people could, you know, we had a, you know, a funding mechanism through public funding mechanisms for independent media outlets so that people weren't reliant on, I don't need to make like $1 million, but I just need to know that my basic needs are met. And if those basic needs are being met, then, you know, I can do my work, you know, free of influence. And I do think that when you have one massive donor like this, or a handful of massive donors, that those people then gain outsized influence over your platform. So I think that as soon as we
just mentioned The Intercept. Look at Glenn Greenwald, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and founder of the fucking platform. And they're going to try and put their thumbs on the scale with his work. I mean, who aren't they going to do that to? Who has the pull in the industry at the level of Glenn Greenwald? You know what I mean? Like and he also said, fuck off, I'm going to Substack.
Exactly. And that was at an organization that he founded himself, you know, so he was a co-founder of that organization. And he said, even him, you know, he was not, you know, immune to that they still tried to, you know, exert that influence over him. And so I do think that, and that's, you know, again, like Rob was saying, that's, you know, they have a massive backer that does the bulk of their funding. And so I think that we on the left need to get, you know, to get serious about, you know, how are we going to be resistant to that sort of corruptive influence, and to make sure, you know, I supported TYT because I was under the impression that they were only taking money from the people, you know, and I can get behind an organization like that when I know that that's the only place that your funding was coming from. As soon as I found out that TYT got that $20 million investment, I stopped donating my $5. You know, why do you need my $5 from an unemployed, you know, people that are marginalized at the margins of society? How can you in good conscience ask those people for money when you're simultaneously taking money from these billionaire investors, you know? And if you have all that money and you got $20 million, I mean, 20 million is more than any of us, you know, dream of ever, you know, having in independent media. How can you possibly do this? And so, you know, and I'd be interested to hear from Robbie as well as to what you think that, you know, what are the other mechanisms that we should be using in independent media to avoid this sort of corruptive influence?
Well, all right. So you're right on a number of fronts. Anytime you see, and this is the one thing about, you know, for one thing, TYT has proven that they have the capacity to raise multiple millions of dollars from their viewers, from fundraising drives. And we all remember whatever the fiasco was about the climate debate, right? They raised a ton of money for that, and they did it very quickly. So they've done it before. I think they did a fundraising drive where they had to raise a couple $1 million to hire some investigative reporters.
I contributed to that.
I think, and a lot of many of which I don't think are even with the network anymore. But I could be wrong about that. But so whenever you get, like I said, I totally agree with you. It's kind of like Bernie Sanders' campaign, right? As opposed to, let's say, Joe Biden's campaign. Like, so Bernie Sanders' campaign was outraising Joe Biden with small donations, right? And that's an abject fact. And, it basically, that to me, you're getting numerous small donations that are adding up to a lot, but they're scattered. Like if you have guys ever saw the heat map for Bernie Sanders' donation scattered across the country, it looked crazy. Right, it looked like Donald Trump donation heat maps, and which is super widespread. And then you would see that Joe Biden was getting almost the same amount of money, but from just a fraction of the areas of the country. And that's telling. And it's the same thing whenever in the business world as well. Whenever you've got one or two people, like you said, donating a massive amount of money to your platform, it's even if, and this is the problem with the Young Turks, with the Intercept, and with lots of other progressive media right now, whether they're big or small, is that what a lot of them don't understand is that we are living in an age right now where trust in the media is at an all-time low, and anything you say or do that even has the appearance of conflict of interest or controlled opposition or anything, especially on the left, if you even hint that you're flinching towards the center, people are going to be on top of it, and they're looking for any excuse to not trust you. So yeah, is Katzenberg pulling the strings at TY2 himself? Probably not at this time, but there might be that. We don't know what's going on in them board meetings. Katzenberg's not on their board, but the other billionaires on the deal, some of them are. We don't know what they're talking about. And that's another thing, coming back to something I heard Jimmy Dore say on stream, which I had never heard him say before. And if he had, I must have just missed it. I'm not an avid watcher, but I have been paying attention recently. Really, but he said that whenever they took that money, that an unnamed executive at TYT approached him and told him that they were going to have to move towards the center, because of that money. And it's just kind of like, well, people were asking me, well, how do you know that money was going to change their direction? It was obvious, and now Jimmy's kind of let that slip out of the bag. But to Kamali's point, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mispronounce your name, but
no problem.
But to your point though, what can we do? Well, you can fund your donors, right? I don't think anybody's gonna really get mad at Cenk Uygur for taking a few $1 million from somebody who didn't try to use that same money to install Hillary Clinton as president, right? It leaves a lot less of a sour taste in your mouth.
A former Republican governor,
right? Yeah. That's another thing. Like, that was his first investment. That was the first investment he got from Buddy Roemer, and that's when he got an additional board member. His name was Kenan Ternasioglu, who at the moment is actually he founded a venture capital firm called Catalino or Catalio Capital. Big point is, all he does is invest in pharmaceutical companies. So you've got like a big pharma investor sitting on your board right now. Who was actually, by the way, actively donating to Hillary Clinton during the 2016 primary. So, I mean, it's a bunch of things that send the entirely wrong signal. And even if nothing nefarious is happening, you just have to know better. You just got to vet your investors. Like, you can't just take 20 million from the first guy that comes along and hands you it. If your perception with your viewers and the rest of the left community or whatever community that you're involved in, if that doesn't really matter to you, then of course take the money and run as soon as they flash it. And that's my biggest beef with TYT. It's that it's not necessarily that you took the money, it's that you took the money and still went on and on about how independent you are. You left that train. You got off that train at the station. Like, it's gone now. And as soon as you took that bag, you secured your bag. Good for you. But stop telling your viewers and the rest of us that you're something that you're just simply not. And financially, you're not. I mean, the article covers like how, several of their upper level executives came over from like they're lifers in the media industry, like from Fox News or from Fox Corporation. Just
like The Intercept.
Right. And like you said, and to Gavin made a point about, how much of it is just business, because I mean, obviously, yes, we're not naive. And the bigger your platform grows, you're going to need more employees, you're going to need more organization, and that's totally understandable. But again, if you claim to be funded by the people, by your viewers, then you have to do that. And if you're not going to do that, fair enough. But again, don't be who you are. And the TYT is not who they were. Who they are now is exactly who they've shown themselves to be, and that's unfortunate. And it is, it's unfortunate.
And I think sorry, Kamal, you go ahead.
No, just jumping in to that point, Robbie. I was just wondering if you've noticed, any sort of change in TYT's, content, structure, messaging since they started taking that money. Have you noticed anything that sort of stood out to you as like this is a break from their norm?
Well, I mean, yeah, definitely. Like I said before, the Russiagate stuff was the huge red flag, number one, right? Their silence on Assange, just like that. It was like he didn't exist anymore. Like the infatuation with Warren, even the entertaining the idea that Elizabeth Warren, because look, I mean, full disclosure, and this could be a conversation for another time or whatever, but I was more in support of Tulsi Gabbard during that time frame. Right. And of course, this was before a lot of things have happened. Like things change. People come out and do stuff and say stuff that, either lower or, raise the ranking in your book. But this was in the middle of a primary. I'm an undecided voter. I'm still looking at the big picture, and I might not have 100% known what the enigma of Tulsi Gabbard would eventually be, but I did 100% know what Elizabeth Warren was. And so did the rest. And so did everybody else on the left. It was very plain to see. From just the people she had around her, from the people that were donating to her campaign. It was, all the signs were there that this is not Bernie light, right? And I know even though Emma Vigeland isn't with TYT anymore, I remember one thing that struck out to me when she was doing the damage report with John. I can't remember his last name. I'm sorry. Yeah, right. So she was doing damage report, and she was like, yes, Bernie, this was at the beginning of the primaries, like right when candidates were starting to announce. And she said that, yeah, Bernie is the most progressive, but she believed that Elizabeth Warren was the most progressive that the Democratic establishment would allow. And that was like, okay, so we're already making excuses, and Bernie hasn't even officially announced his re-election bid at that point. But I think that's the thing, is that
moving the goalpost.
Yes, we're moving the goalpost, because it's like, okay, we know we want Bernie, right? But we're not going to get Bernie. So let's just go ahead and start accepting Elizabeth Warren.
It was a business decision. Yeah. They were like, oh shit, this could very easily go to Warren. There's a point where she was really high in the polls, and Cenk was like, in the event that she wins, we want to make sure we're Team Warren. We're, home of the Warren fans too. They were really, splitting it both ways. And that really, repulsed me as well.
But here's the one more quick point I want to make about that is that here's the thing about that is that notice come Super Tuesday, all of Biden's competition got out of the race, right? Except for the one person that was going to take the largest vote share away from Sanders.
So she could come in third in her home state and embarrass herself and ruin her whole political career.
She could do that, but she's also, I mean, look, she's going to get a job somewhere, which is obviously she's either going to get a job or she's going to get reelected. Right. I mean, I don't see her losing her seat. And quite honestly, she keeps playing ball with the establishment side of the Democratic Party. She's going to be safe. But just the fact remained that, it just didn't make any sense to me. But it made perfect sense to me what the strategy was. The strategy was that, yeah, she might come in third in Massachusetts, but those voters that are voting for Warren, she's not taking Biden voters away from. She's not taking voters away from Biden. She's taking voters away from Bernie Sanders. Yeah. Why? Because people like TYT spent months telling their viewers that Elizabeth Warren was an acceptable alternative to Bernie Sanders. And when it came down to, hey, we really need to get all of the rabble out of the primary, right? We gave you guys a chance through Super Tuesday. Nothing's really happening. Everybody get out. Obama got on the phone and got what's his name? Got Buttigieg out. Got Klobuchar out because hey, you're going to take votes from Biden. Nobody got on the phone with Elizabeth Warren and told her shit. Right, she stayed in, and then we all see what happens.
And she got a huge cash infusion too from that, this corporate.
Yeah, she changed her tune on super PACs.
Yeah. So
minute, right when it was clear that she had no path to victory and that she was going to get slaughtered on Super Tuesday, she starts betrays her big campaign promise, starts taking this money from let's be honest, this money was clearly funneled into her campaign to stop
one person.
Yeah.
It came from one. I was actually in on the breaking of that story. It was $14 million into a super PAC right before Super Tuesday. It came from one person, a $1 billionaire donor. She just dumped a whole bunch of money, and it was basically to run anti-Sanders ads.
Yeah.
It wasn't because they knew that Warren wasn't going to win. So what did they? They just basically needed to get the message out there to just bash on Bernie as hard as possible, or make it look like, hey, or a last ditch effort. But honestly, like if Warren was really progressive and really a friend of the progressive movement, she would have known the strategizers around her would have known what her impact was. And then that's just what I'm saying. Like it always stunk to me, and I never understood.
Knowing your impact, Robbie, that brings up another point that I wanted to kind of get your opinion about as it relates to TYT. And it's one of the people at TYT that constantly kind of perplexes me a little bit. I wanted to ask about your I don't know, your take, trust level, like the level of credibility you would have from a left perspective to Anna Kasparian. Because, nominally, I don't know. I don't watch TYT that much. I never really had a strong relationship with the people from TYT. What I most remember Anna Kasparian was from the show that she did with Michael Brooks. And it was weird how, Michael Brooks to me, and, full disclosure, I loved his show. I thought he was a great voice for the left. She seemed like much more of an authentic leftist around Michael than she does now that he's passed, and she's still on TYT, almost shilling for Cenk, defending him whenever there's justified criticism against him. I'm wondering what your take is on that, and to what extent you think it's I guess unethical as a journalist to be participating in an organization that you think is no longer up to par, right? Obviously Jimmy Dore famously exited TYT because, he didn't agree with the coverage.
Right. So as far as Anna goes, like I said, I don't have any personal relationship with any of these people. And just basically just what I've seen. And honestly, I get more Anna off of her social media presence these days than I do from TYT, video content. It was a bad look with the Madeleine Albright thing. Like nobody on the left wants to see you. Nobody wants to see that. Right. Only centrists at best care what Madeleine Albright has to say about anything.
What's that referring to? What was that? Did she?
She did a really softball. She did a really softball interview with Madeleine Albright not too long ago, and it kind of left a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And especially coming from the direction that's supposed to be coming from. But yeah, man, so. It's kind of tough seeing she's. I feel like she does spend most of her time now fighting the Cenk's battle. But to your point, I feel like if I'm going to agree with anything that anybody on TYT says, more often than not, it'll probably come from her, right? If that makes any sense. I mean, but lately she's been a bad take machine. They all have, and it's really been hard to kind of, I want to revert to my 19, 20-year-old self and trust these guys again. Right. But it's hard. And, as far as staying at an outlet to where the messaging doesn't fit. Well, I mean, as far as Anna goes, that's her outlet, basically. She's one of the executive editors. And she's and as long as that money's coming in, it really just, like I said, it's all boils down to
her as well. Right.
It has to. The question is, what matters most? Does your credibility matter, or does getting paid matter? Unfortunately, to a lot of the people out there, I mean, her credibility probably mattered at first, but she's probably secure in her credibility now.
It's just
and the money might matter more.
And also, just I mean, compared to how shitty the actual mainstream media is with MSNBC and everything, I'm sure that the hosts Anna and Cenk, I'm sure they rationalize everything that goes on there behind the scenes because they are better than MSNBC. They're having on
Right.
Nina Turner, they're promoting Nina Turner, they're promoting progressive, so they can always kind of fall back on that in their mind to justify
Absolutely.
what they do.
Well, and look, yes, you make a great point. I know we spend a lot of time criticizing, right? But and while the differences are getting slimmer and slimmer as we go, right, with TYT and like MSNBC, right, they're almost at this point, to me, they're near indiscernible from one another as far as like their coverage of most stories go. They're pretty much they have the same takes, and that's unfortunate. But going back to what you said about, should you stay at an outlet to where you feel like the messaging isn't there or if it's not vibing with what you believe, I work with a very volatile and controversial group of people on Twitter, right? So and obviously we're not like a brain trust, right? So I don't always agree with everything Nico says. I'm sure Nico doesn't agree with everything I say all the time. Same thing with the couch, So
same with me and Gavin.
And I completely understand, Nico's a firebrand. He gets himself in trouble all the time, right? And then I got people looking at me like I'm crazy. But the fact of the matter is that I know when it boils down to it, we're all on the same side. I know there's people that I'm working with, they may say, some things that a lot of people might disagree with, but I know in the end, on the core issues of what really matters in this society, we're all on the same side, and it's easy to tell, especially like people on the show. We're all on the same side. We all want the same things. We may disagree on smaller things, and those disagreements may get heated. But as long as we can come out the other side with some kind of progress or some kind of discussion, I mean, that's what it's really all about. So even though like Nico may say some stuff that I disagree with at times, I mean, a lot of times I do agree with him, but am I going to leave? Would I leave the network over it? I mean, it would have to be something crazy. So, I mean, I get why Anna sticks with Cenk. I mean, they're the two that got to where they're at now, but the fact is that we get into some sort of denial. I guess you must get into some sort of denial once you blow up and become a star like they are. Like they're stars now and they're celebrities and they're paid and they're chilling. And, after a certain point, you might not, you look at yourself in the mirror and you think you are who you've always been and you don't realize the shift that you've made and you deny it when somebody points it out because it's like sour grapes. It's like, no, man, you're crazy. You haven't been paying attention. I pushed Bernie. Like, and they always use it as a crutch. Well, we push Bernie more than anybody else. Well, because nobody's pushing Bernie. It's easy to say when nobody else is doing it, but but it used to be that way. It's not anymore.
By the way, thanks so much, David, for the super chat. We really appreciate that support.
But it's not anymore. I mean, there's channels like this one. There's a million other channels. We are the media now. And you know what? We're doing it better than TYT, if I must say so myself. So, I mean, we don't really need them to be what they were anymore. You know what I'm saying?
What I'm
saying?
like,
after like they feel entitled to it. Go for it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, 100%. I just want to echo the point that you're making because as somebody, obviously we're novices, right? Gavin and I,
right.
We're not at even the place in our careers where you would be at. We're just, two guys, decided, we had shit to say. So we started a podcast and, I think one of the things that I've really taken away from this is that, if you do have an audience that you're able to build and put together, you can make a really ethical living doing this. You don't need the outside sources. Like, yeah, it's really tough and it is grueling to get there, right? It's a very competitive field. There's not the structure set up for independent voices to succeed. You're squashed by, worse voices that are, just, blasted out to everybody constantly. But I just don't see I don't see the idea when, somebody like Kyle Kalinske can set up, his webcam and have as many views as the entire Hills YouTube channel, as many subscribers as the entire Hill YouTube channel. You can't convince me that you need the kind of backing that a show like Rising has to be successful, right? Like it baffles me that they don't just say, fuck this and just, set it up in their basement. You know what I mean? Why, other than grifting, would people continue to take this massive amount of money? Like, I feel like as a working class reporter, I need a working class salary or my perspective is going to be tainted, right? Like, I mean, I feel like that's obvious to anybody that's actually a working person.
I would say in the case of Rising, to be fair, I understand why they stick with the Hill, because like the amount of producing and like scheduling that goes on with that show is clearly would be completely out of their reach. Like to get on all those guests every day, to set up the panels, to produce the different angles and the graphics, like all that you do need to produce that kind of show. I do think you would need that kind of I mean, at least some sort of a corporate backing, I think, but that's a different kind of show than what a lot of people like us are doing.
Sure, but the Hill's been good to him. So go ahead, Kamali.
No, I was just going to say, I think that that's the kind of thing that we'll have to think about as we develop these shows to start to realize, like, in order to compete with Rising on the Hill, I think, you saw they started out like a year ago and they just surpassed 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Like, we can't get that kind of growth on from small independent outlets. And I think that one thing that we need to start to look at is how are we going to compete, because we do see from what Robbie's been reporting on here, this kind of funding structure can be corruptive and can alter the coverage of an outlet. And so if we want to stay sort of pure to that, I think that we on the independent, small independent left media need to start to, get serious from right now about how are we going to compete with these outlets, the TYTs, who are going to be the next decade's MSNBCs. And we're going to have to be pushing out a more left message than they are, because let's be real, TYT is a capitalist, structure. Cenk is a capitalist. He is a proud capitalist. He screams that every chance that he gets. So we need to start to think about, well, how are we going to compete with those capitalist media, enterprises and not become corrupted in the same way? And I think, my shtick is, democracy in the workplace and democratizing our workplace and building these things up and building these platforms up to where we always, where the workers are controlling these things and you have that sort of, popular control over the platform, instead of having a handful of people, the board of directors of TYT that you can then corrupt in with one or two billionaires can come in, drop $1 million on the table, and all of a sudden they have outsized influence over your platform now. After, I think that Cenk and Anna and all of them, they did, some amazing work to build up their platform to the place that it was. And I don't think, like Zach was saying, they didn't need to do this. They were sustaining as it was, and the fundraising, they could raise, they had the ability to raise $1 million in over the course of a few short months. So they didn't need that other injection of cash, but they did it because they wanted to speed up their growth even more and make even more money. And, they see that out of it. So I think that we, in independent left media, need to start to think about how are we going to structure ourselves in order to avoid these same mistakes happening to us in the future. How do we, avoid becoming, bought out in the same way?
Well, what's your take on that, Robbie?
I'm about to say one of the last things I'd probably say on that is, I think everything's still tight and tense right now, moving out of the general. We're still really getting into the Biden administration, like his picks. There's still a lot of animosity there. Especially even it used to be the indie left versus the mainstream left. Now the indie left is kind of weeding out who is and who is, and who isn't. And I'm not a gatekeeper, right? Your politics are your politics. You believe what you believe. But regardless of that, the fact of the matter is that, eventually indie media needs to move past this stage of competition that we're in right now and try to move towards a form of consolidation, because there is a untold wealth of indie journalistic talent. Like there's 4 of us right here, and then there's an endless sea of us, right? There's so many, anybody can do that. And that's the thing. Like, to me, like, yeah, we all like getting credit for our work, but in the end, it's the message that matters, right? We want to get this message out to as many people as possible. So we all need to try to be on the same page. And I'm not trying to take away anybody's identity or take anybody's grasp of nuance from certain, issues away from them. That's what makes us individuals. But, in the end, we're all trying to grasp at the same market share. Right. And if we're looking at it from a business perspective, and there's a lot of us competing for the same people. And in the end, I feel like we spend a lot of time bickering back and forth between leftist personalities, indie personalities spend a lot of time beefing with one another, and sometimes, like as we've seen in the rap game, that can be lucrative, right?
Oh, that's the reason it happens. It's 100% for the click.
but in the end, it drives too many wedges. I feel like,
yeah.
And I understand like the force to vote fight going on right now, or that was going on. That was an intense one, and there's going to be some hurt feelings for a really long time because of that, and that's unfortunate. But I also feel like in the same way that the vote itself would have basically say, okay, this is who's voting for it, this is who wouldn't vote for it, so we know who to primary. In that same vein, the people that were for and were against the force to vote movement, more or less, and I'm not saying every aspect of it was like completely genuinely thought through, but I mean, look, I'm a simple-minded man. Maybe it shows, maybe it doesn't, but in the end, politics is about leverage and your use of it. And anytime you get leverage and don't use it, that seems to me like bad politics. I mean, were you ever going to use that leverage to actually get the Medicare for all you wanted? Probably not. But if you're playing a long game, I mean, look, the result's still going to be the same. The only difference is that you're going to have a floor vote squeezed in between the time they say no, right? And the time you suggest it. So, in like, I guess now we see like who really was trying to go for it and who wasn't. And like I said, it was just a lot of excuses. Like that was the biggest problem for me. It was just like, oh, what's up with all these excuses?
AOC tweeted at Justin Jackson. She gave him nothing but horseshit, political, nothings, right? Like, I mean, that's the whole reason why she started hyping Pago, right? Even when she name dropped it in her interview with AOC, name dropped it in her interview with Jeremy Scahill, which came out a few weeks ago, planting the seeds. Like, this is a really obscure, weedsy policy thing. This is what she was going to use to cop out on voting for Nancy Pelosi the whole time. That was her back negotiating that she implied, which was essentially nothing. That was essentially giving Nancy Pelosi what she wanted. It was a Pago exemption, not even removal.
Yeah, I mean, but look, I mean, I hope, but like I said, I do hope we can move towards this, this consolidated independent, because if we all kind of got banded together, I mean, the MSNBCs of the world, they wouldn't exist in 10 years because we'd be the ones controlling the market, and I do have to cut out of here, guys.
That's fine.
Yeah, for sure.
I share a space with my young son who sleeps in my room, and then it's like I'm holding up his bedtime. But
No problem.
yeah. But before I go, to anybody that's watching, thanks again, guys, for having me on the show. It's been great. I'd love to come back anytime you guys want me. But if you guys, anybody watching it, if you guys want to check me out, you can check me out on Twitter at RobLitoFire. And if you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day, or tomorrow, just if you feel like it, look online, go pick up a book, do something, read up, and educate yourself just a little bit more about autism and its effect on families and people, so you can build a more inclusive and educated world for people like my son and people that you may know all around the world. So that's basically my shtick. So I hope you guys have a good night.
Thank you. And great meeting you, Robin. Yeah.
Hey, man. Hit me up, guys. You guys have a good night. I'll talk to you guys later.
Hell yeah. We look forward to it. Thanks so much,
guys.
Have a great one. All right, that was our special guest, Robbie Jaeger. Thanks so much for coming on the show tonight. And as I mentioned earlier, everyone make sure to click those links in the description to check out his great work, the journalism he's doing, really valuable stuff.